Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about the ongoing war in Ukraine. Oh boy, it's one of those serious topic kind of days. It's so serious, as a matter of fact, I felt that it would be inappropriate for me to put gameplay in the background, especially of Call of Duty, because in case you didn't know, the Warzone map Verdansk was based on the Donetsk region of Ukraine, because the developers thought if there was going to be a large-scale war in the future, it would be Russia invading that part of Ukraine, and lo and behold, that's what's happening. So if you've seen some of these clips of war and thought some of those buildings might be familiar to you, it might be because they're based off of real places. I do want to say pretty early in this video that I am not going to try to expert to you about the finer qualities of what's going on in Ukraine. I intend for this video to be purely my opinion only and a little bit of an emotional appeal because I am unqualified to offer expert advice about Ukraine. We're a topic channel now. We do a lot of topics. I research things, but I can't speak Russian. I can't speak Ukrainian. I'm not a historian of either the Soviet Union, Russia, or Ukraine. I've not served in military conflicts. I've never fought against people using these kind of weapons. I am not a military historian either, or an expert or a policy advisor, so my opinion should matter a lot less than that of a great number of other people, and that's important to remember online as well, because suddenly everybody's an expert about Ukraine and everybody wants to have the hottest take, to get the clout, to share the thing the fastest, and that's just one of the major failings of our overall culture here in the United States. So I do still feel the need to do something, just to get it off my chest because it's been worrying me, so we're making this video. I might do a charity stream in the near future or just donate some money to charity on my own. And yes, I know I'm wearing the Nuka-Cola shirt today because we're going to be talking about nuclear war near the end of the video. So the problem in Ukraine has been building since at least the 90s to the best of my memory. Ukraine was once part of the Soviet Union. They broke off and became independent. Ukraine did have a few nuclear weapons lingering from Soviet times, but they voluntarily gave up their nuclear weapons to Russia in order to get security assurances that they would not be invaded. They made a variety of strategic alliances with various European nations and NATO and EU and all that kind of stuff. And they've also worked very hard to maintain friendly relations with Russia. Now, Russia would probably be comfortable reabsorbing the Ukraine because of its strategic seaports and its closer striking position of Europe. But the point is that Ukraine has tried to do the right thing, and they definitely got screwed. At the end of the day, Russia wanted it more than they wanted peace, so they decided to invade and didn't really seem to care that they were going to be painted as the bad guy in international news. And I know that this is a weirdly controversial opinion about who's good and bad here, and we're going to get to that in a little bit, but I do want to say that Ukraine certainly wasn't the one that sent tanks into Russia. It's not, no matter what Ukraine did, no matter what they said, no matter how they mouthed off or how they responded to various threats, Ukraine wasn't the one that invaded Russia. It's the other way around, and Ukraine, as a sovereign nation, has the right to join NATO, has the right to join the European Union, or do really whatever they want within their borders, and capitulating to outside threats is simply appeasement, like appeasing Hitler in the very early stages of World War II, or kind of like bullying, honestly. Bullies will say they deserved it. I warned them if they did this thing, they would get beat up, and they did it anyway. And even if it's a totally, normal thing that they got beat up for, not giving up their lunch money, that's sort of the logic that's being applied here. It's sort of like psychopath logic, some sort of backwards crazy logic, but a lot of people use it. When I was going through all my harassment problems, it was a lot of messages like, if you do these things for us or work from us, it'll all stop, and if you don't, it's going to get worse. And of course, I didn't respond to any of that, so it was like, okay, well now he deserves it because he didn't do what we said. That's kind of the same logic that Russia is applying to Ukraine here. Now, more specifically for Russian politics, Russia is diametrically opposed to NATO and also generally the European Union, so they're not big fans of having a NATO member sharing a border with them, because that would mean that NATO can move all of its troops and all of its nukes and all of its whatever right up to the border legally without any sort of international kerfluffles. And Russia doesn't want that. They view that as a threat to their sovereignty because they view NATO as a threat in the same way that we view them as a threat. So from a strategic military standpoint, I can understand the logic that they can use, and I can understand why Ukraine joining NATO is a concern for the Russian military or Russian sovereignty, but I don't think it justified an invasion of a nation and slaughter of civilians. On the topic of civilians, there's fake news everywhere, which I absolutely expected. I have even retweeted and shared some myself. I had to unretweet and take some of those down. There's people using video games to talk about the ghost of Kiev, the fighter pilot. There's old clips of like the 2013 invasion or like a war in Georgia in 2014-15, if I'm not mistaken. They're showing clips of that giant power plant explosion in China and saying that it's Russians attacking, and a great number of role reversals too, because not very many people in the West speak Russian or Ukrainian, so it's very difficult to identify a sort of nationality based on people's talk or how they're dressing and stuff like that. So it's very easy for somebody to show a clip of like Russians murdering civilians and say, oh, this is Ukrainians murdering civilians, or, you know, Ukrainians take out a Russian tank and they say this is Russians taking out a Ukrainian tank. And a lot of us over here don't really know any better. So I've personally had to work very hard to be very careful about what I actually believe in this conflict. I do believe, though, that it's overall very embarrassing for Russian military prowess. The Russian military was considered the third largest and third strongest in the entire world, second only behind China and the United States. They were the bad guys. They were the boogeymen for 50, 60 years of American, or really the history of most Western democracies in Europe and even South America and other places, that the Russians could invade, they could nuke us, they could do all these things. They've got all these goofy technologies and unlimited military budget and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is they're struggling. They're kind of failing to take over Ukraine, or barely taking it over in a sort of miserable slogfest that's probably going to leave the country not even worth having. And I think this is very embarrassing for a larger military to be unable to steamroll a smaller military force with a smaller nation that has less allies, less weapons, less money, less everything, and they just can't do it. Their equipment's falling apart, the tires are rotting, the tanks are running out of gas, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I think that's an excuse for people to surrender. People are eating expired rations, and they're having a really hard time with the guerrilla tactics too, which leads me to the next topic. I was talking about this in the mod room and Discord, and one of my mods mentioned that this is kind of a wake-up call that maybe the Second Amendment isn't a joke. We've talked about the Second Amendment a great number of times on this YouTube channel, and I would be the guy who says, well, yeah, like no matter what kind of assault rifle you have or what kind of, you know, high caliber thing, you're not going to be taking down aircraft and tanks and planes. But you can't deny the effectiveness of the civilian militia in Ukraine just popping Russian soldiers when they get out of their tanks on P-brakes, hitting the intake valve of the tanks for air with with Molotovs to force them out and hosing them down. There are Russian soldiers out there getting popped by 70-year-old babushkas with AK-47s. And while these things don't really defeat tanks and they don't really take down airplanes or stop missile strikes or whatever, an armed citizen force apparently does very much so stop an invading force from controlling anything on the ground, at least in any meaningful way. So yeah, just arming citizens and having them waiting for the chance to basically take a terror attack or guerrilla tactic and just pop somebody massively slows down the invasion force of a modern military. And I also have to give props to President Zelensky, who is a comedian in his former career, a literal professional clown, has decided to take it seriously and not retreat from Ukraine and fight and die there. Didn't even move his family, as a matter of fact. Out there making propaganda videos. You got the former president of the Ukraine out there with a PKM trying to defend Kiev against invaders. There's other civilian soldiers. I've seen school teachers. I've seen old ladies. I saw an old lady out there get hit with a mortar and blow one of her legs off and like crawl to safety and want to keep fighting, apparently. That's what the subtitle said in the little video that I've watched. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but these normal everyday people are going full Stalingrad and just making Russians pay in blood, which is absurd. I give props to the entire country. They're winning a war and they're being oddly humorous about it. It helps make me feel less bad watching these videos because Ukrainians are out there shooting like RPGs and laws and stuff at tanks and dancing about it and making up little songs and telling jokes and doing. I watched one of them sabotage a bridge and flip a Russian tank into the water to get it stuck and then yell at the guys like, hey, you know, you guys out there, you washing your tank, the river's pretty dirty, it's a bad place to wash it. And they're just talking trash to people. You know, it's Russian warship, go F yourself, this and that. And I've really not seen a people treat war in such a manner. And I say that knowing full well that this is a humanitarian crisis. This is a full-scale war. People are dying and suffering and it's brutal. And they're just out there trying to make the best of it. So God bless them. I also think it's brilliant that they punish Russian soldiers by making them call their moms. I don't know if you've seen these videos, but not all, but a number of the Russian soldiers that get captured are allowed to call their parents. And this serves Two purposes. Number one, it's great propaganda for Ukraine. It makes them look compassionate. And number two, it stirs up massive dissent in Russia when all of a sudden a lot of people's parents are getting calls saying that they've been captured somewhere in Ukraine. It stirs civil unrest there. And I honestly think that's a brilliant tactic. If you look at a lot of the Russian soldiers that have been captured, a good number of them appear to be poorly trained conscripts, school teachers, lawyers, engineers, just people that got a notice that they were going to go on a military training exercise, and within a week, all of a sudden, they're ordered to invade Ukraine. Personally, I believe the strategy is to use these reservists or conscripts as literal cannon fodder to wear Ukraine down, and then the real attack force is going to arrive and mop everybody up. That's just what I generally suspect, but I could be wrong. Oh man, we haven't even talked about the economic collapse in Russia or certain industries or sanctions or whatever, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Another part of this story that bothers me perhaps more than the war, and perhaps that says a lot about me, is watching Western democracies almost instantly divide in two, at least politically speaking. Our governments, the current leadership do seem to be in agreement about what to do and what steps to take, but inside almost every country, the parties have kind of hard split between supporting Putin and not supporting Putin, because that's, I guess, how democracy works now. In America, it's pretty much playing a blame game of, did Trump cause this or did Biden cause this? Was it Trump's policies of defunding Ukraine and wanting to weaken NATO? Or was it Biden being an ineffectual leader or offering, support for Ukraine, joining NATO being the straw that broke the camel's back? Or is it a relationship issue between, two different types of leaders dealing with the Russian president? And blah, 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 blah. It all kind of turns into some somewhat nasty stuff where everybody wants to blame another person and use this war as political clout or ammunition or some sort of smear campaign against whatever politician that they don't like at the time. To me, that's terrifying because the war in Ukraine is very serious. We're going to talk about nuclear war, I swear. That's why I'm wearing the Nuka-Cola shirt today. But we're really flirting with nuclear war here. We're flirting with the collapse of all of Western civilization, perhaps the end of the world in the worst case scenario. And what a lot of people want to do in my country is play political blame game and try to get their little jabs in and their viral tweets and blah, blah, blah so that they can get reelected. And that's just scary. I mean, I guess it's not any different than coronavirus, which people didn't take seriously at all. And the propaganda efforts seem to be working. As most of you know, there's a lot of Russian propaganda that makes it to the United States, primarily about our elections, but also about vaccines. And one that I kind of want to do a whole video about, not a lot of you probably know, is that a lot of our Christian media, especially online, Facebook, social media and stuff like that, is very heavily dominated by Russian troll farms. Something like 90% of Christian content online comes from Russia, which is like probably one of the biggest psyops in the world. So I want to pull back from all of that, and I'm going to offer my opinion on how our current leadership is dealing with this problem. I believe that Joe Biden is handling this problem in a very pragmatic manner. He is not going to take the hero route. He is not going to stop this invasion or send troops over there or do anything that would escalate the conflict and poke the bear, so to speak, pun intended. And the sanctions that Biden and all, European countries are levying do appear to be working. And this is, while not the good approach, the good approach is to really do something, to really save civilians, to send money, to step up, to slap your big dick on the table and tell, the bad guys that, we're going to throw down, I'm the law around here, we're going to end this. But we're flirting with nuclear war. So the smart, practical, cold calculating decision is exactly what we're doing with all of these sanctions and condemnments and shutting things down. And not a fan of that strategy. I guess the hero in me would prefer the war strategy perhaps, but I can't deny that it's not working. Russian stocks, Russian bonds, Russian companies are worth literally nothing on a lot of markets. You can't trade them on a lot of markets. Even in Russia, the value of their currency dipped 30-40% and then rebounded. Stocks are down 50+%. If you lived in Russia and you were planning to retire, good luck with that. If you lived in Russia and you were planning to get any foreign goods from any country or imported food or anything, good luck with that. The Iron Curtain is going back up, but from the other way around. They're keeping you guys out, not letting people back in. This is expected to hurt the Russian economy for up to the next decade. 5 to 15 years is the range that I'm seeing, depending on what articles. It could even start an economic collapse. There's protests in Russia. People are considering going on strike in Russia, which I think would probably get them killed, given what I know about the law in that country. But I do think the sanctions are really, really hurting the country. It's hurting Putin's private wealth. It's hurting the oligarchs. It's hurting the generals that are pretty wealthy. And it's making them pay for Ukraine, but monetarily, which doesn't seem the same as paying in blood, but I do promise you there is a point where people cut their losses and they pull back and say this is too costly. So, I mean, I guess that's working. A bigger issue that we have to ask ourselves, and I've talked about this on Twitter, is why we invest so much into autocratic nations. Anytime Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, or pretty much any nation around the world with a questionable human rights record wants money for some kind of big project, or they want to bring WWE to Saudi Arabia, or China wants the Olympics or the NBA or something, every single American country is willing to just throw themselves at the feet of autocrats and throw down money and change the content and do whatever to get a cut of that sweet, sweet underserved foreign market. And when you do things like that, you only prop up these nations and make them bigger, stronger, and better. Exactly what we're doing with China and a lot of other places, but we're kind of taking that away from Russia now. All the foreign franchises, all the foreign brands, all the things that their citizens are used to are suddenly disappearing, and I'm really hoping that has a real impact. And I also hope that our corporations just stop giving money to autocrats, but that's probably never going to happen because that's not how money works. All right, now finally, at the end of the video, the topic that I think everybody's been sweating about is the fact that we are flirting with nuclear war. Russia is a nuclear power, probably the second largest nuclear power behind the United States, and only barely larger than China, though as we've seen from their current military technology, a lot of the Soviet-era stuff isn't holding up very well. That being said, I definitely think that Russia has functioning nuclear warheads that can hit their targets, not only in Ukraine, but around the world if necessary. Vladimir Putin, without saying it explicitly, has made a number of sort of beaten around the bush statements and policy decisions that does indicate that nuclear is an option for them. And this terrifies me. It only takes one nuclear bomb to start global chaos. There are so many nukes just on standby, especially during this conflict, ready to go to guarantee mutually assured destruction. It's called the MAD doctrine, and I agree because it's total madness. I hate this one. But I genuinely think that if one nuclear warhead goes off, you're going to see at least 100 more pop off. You're going to see a global World War III financial market collapse, utter chaos around the globe. I don't think that's what Russia wants. I don't think that's what they plan to do. I feel lucky that we're a little bit removed from that scenario. We're not staring nuclear war in the face. We're just kind of walking toward nuclear war's house right now at a leisurely pace. So there's still time to do this right. Nuclear war is something that scares me for a lot of reasons. I grew up near the end of the Cold War, so I got a little bit of that nuclear war scare, but then a lot of the movies that I watched as kids came from that era, the 70s and 80s, so a lot of nuclear propaganda. And then as an adult, getting an engineering degree and working on alternative energies and learning about nuclear and bombs and blah, 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 I learned how incredibly destructive these things are. And the short version of this is if you live in a major metropolitan city in the United States, anywhere that has a population of over 500,000 people, I guarantee you that it's a nuclear target and you will be turned to a cinder the very moment this starts. Even the people that survive are going to have to struggle with radiation for decades. If we drop enough of these bombs, 500 to 1,000 of them, it's potentially enough to end almost all life on the planet, at least all human life. It would take as little as 100 nuclear bombs to cause societal collapse, to just break infrastructure to the point where at least certain regions fall back into absolute anarchy and barbarism. And it worries me that that's the path that we're on. Like I said, we're casually walking toward nuclear war's house. We're not there yet. He's texting you where you at, and you say, I'll be there in 5, and you're really 10 minutes away. I kind of feel like it's where we're at. And it terrifies me. It makes me shake. I'm afraid one night I'm going to wake up and hear the air raid sirens going and realize it's not a tornado. And since I live in Dallas, I'm done. I'm a cinder. There's nothing I can do. Couldn't escape the city. And I really hope that doesn't happen. NATO, the European Union, United States, and all the Western allies are kind of stuck in this very difficult choice. You might have seen the meme superhero guy that sweats and can't determine what button he needs to push down here, but they have to choose to either sacrifice Ukraine and just let Russia have it, let all these civilians die, blow it up, just destroy it, or maybe global nuclear holocaust. All life on Earth, Ukraine. All life on Earth, Ukraine. Not a good choice, not a good place to be, which is why I think our current leadership in most Western countries are taking very practical, non-military approaches as much as possible here. So that scares me a lot. And then the final little topic here at the end of the video is like, well, what do I do? What do you do? And that's the thing that frustrates me. That's why I haven't done a video sooner, is that there's nothing for me to do. There's literally nothing for me to do. All of these decisions are made at levels so high that contacting any of my representatives do nothing. Tweeting, Facebook posts, YouTube videos do very little in most cases other than express an opinion. I guess there's a propagandistic element to almost all communication, even including this, because when you create something, it's created with a purpose, and even the words you choose influence that purpose. I think for now, the best and most practical thing that anybody can do is donate money to charities for Ukrainian civilians that are fleeing. There are other charities that are buying weapons and stuff. Don't do that. Just let's help get the people out of the country that can't fight or won't fight, help them get resettled, give them some support, and just help the innocent people. I think that's the best thing we can do. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing, because I don't think there's any other choices. I'm certainly not flying to Ukraine and taking up arms for anything. So yeah, that is my totally unqualified, probably biased opinion about Ukraine after sitting back for about a week and watching all of this chaos unfold. For those of you that have watched this entire video, thank you. I appreciate the support. I'm glad that you agree with these opinions enough to at least listen. And I don't know if I'll be doing too many of these sort of just talking topical videos. I like the research ones better, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.